Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to the studio. I'm going to say good morning to people who are joining us in GMT, and for our lovely friends in CET and elsewhere, it's happy lunchtime or good afternoon. So, my name is Ian Jindal, and I'm the CEO at RetailX, and it's a great pleasure to welcome you to discuss our flagship annual report. I have such a soft spot for this report. If you've come to the webinar because you've already downloaded the report, then you know it's 300 pages of protein and facts. If you have just seen this first and you think, oh, that looks like an amazing report, wonderful. When we finish today, we'll drop you an email with a link so you can get your hands on the report and go through it yourselves. Now, we're not going to go through all 300 pages. That would just be wrong. Rather, I'm joined in the studio by our lovely panelists, and we're going to pick out some of the key themes that are just worth talking about at a high level. And it's a great pleasure to welcome them. But let's not look at their LinkedIn photos. Let's rather meet them in real life. So we have Jonathan, who's our managing editor and who did all of the work really on putting the report together. Also Angad and Dim. So let's kick off with some intros. Jonathan, just intro yourself first, and then Angad, if you can tell us who you are and a bit about FarEye, and Dim, introduce yourself and also Ascendia. So Jonathan, let's hear from you first. Welcome.
Yeah, my name's Jonathan Wright, as the words there say. I'm the RetailX managing editor, which means that I not only edit reports such as the Europe report, but I also wrangle the cats that we call the editorial team.
Wonderful, and the research as well. Angad, it's lovely to see you joining us again. Why don't you tell people a bit about you and also FarEye, of course.
Sure. Thanks, Ian. Thanks for hosting me and thanks for this warm welcome. Thanks for having me here. I'm Angad. I head product at FarEye, working as Director of Product Management. I also work for our European growth as a region, so really interested in this report and the marvelous work you have put together with this. FarEye is a last mile SaaS-based solutions company to help manage deliveries and customer experiences. We'll talk more about that, but yeah, we work with customers like Wayfair, IKEA, DHL, etc. So with global enterprises. But happy to be here and sharing our view on how we see overall e-commerce retail grow further from here. Thank you.
Wonderful. I particularly like the fact that in your client list you've got the retailers themselves, but also the carriers use you. So you have a sort of poacher, gamekeeper, infrastructure front end view, which is fascinating. So I hope we'll cover some of that today. Dim, wonderful to see you as well. And also a massive thanks to Ascendia, who've partnered with us on this report. Well, with me personally since about 2019 and previously before that. So do give everyone an overview and maybe just mention as well some of the focus on sustainability that you've had, because as people will know, in another webinar, we've done quite a big report with you on that. But Dim, just over to you. Tell us about you.
Thanks, Ian. So thanks for hosting this this great webinar, and really interested about the report. So my name is Dim Baars, Global Account Director in Ascendia. To introduce Ascendia briefly, we are a cross-border delivery expert. We're based globally in Asia, North America, Europe, Australia. From different origins around the world, we help e-retailers, marketplaces to make their deliveries sustainable, reliable, and as easy as possible.
Wonderful. Well, that you've covered off all of my buzzwords there, which is fantastic. So we're not going to talk too much about marketplaces today. It's an amazingly important topic, but luckily we have a European marketplaces report, which goes into it in such depth. I'm not going to bother skating over it. I think for us, you've touched on sustainability, and we'll look at that. But I think what's interesting from my perspective is, that Europe is both a market of very distinctive regions and countries, but also, thanks to market harmonization, is an incredible cross-border market. It's home to some of the world's biggest brands, and as you'll know from our Global Elite 1000 webinar and report, Europe's brands are themselves around 40% of the top 1000 retailers globally. So it's a fascinating sector, and I should just point out that we've done the sector proud and the market proud. I'm just giving you an overview of the content pages. I'm not even going to bother flicking through them. As I say, it's nearly 300 pages in total, but it just gives you an idea of the coverage and the depth we've gone into. I think one of the important things we've had from the outset is there's no point assembling a random bag of facts about countries, because that's what Google is for. What's important about the work that Jonathan's done is that the data on every country and market is directly comparable. So you can compare, Lithuania with Belgium, France with Sweden, the regions together. And speaking of which, we have, for comparability, grouped Europe into what we call e-commerce regions. And these are markets where the characteristics, both of the consumer's expectations and behaviors, also the logistic realities, make the experience similar, and the maturity of the market and the players. So again, this isn't a political grouping, a legal grouping. It's just to help you understand that within the market, there are certain regions and sub-regions that are internally consistent and help with comparisons. So for those who are looking to move across markets, we hope that's helpful. So as I said, we're not going to dive into it anymore because we have the author here. So Jonathan, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you, as someone who's done this now for the last 4 or 5 years, if you're at dinner and someone said, "What's your job?" You say, "I look at Europe." Just give us the characteristics. What stood out for you this year as the things we should be discussing around the board table or the dinner table or with our kids about this enormous, complex market?
Yeah, thank you, Ian. I'll caveat this with saying that as a journalist, I tend to look for bad news because that's what we do. It's more interesting. But I would say that it's been a time of, when I think back a couple of years even doing these reports, there's a lot more turbulence in the market. In part, of course, that's because of the war in Ukraine, which is in turn related to inflation, which is in turn related to a certain amount of political turmoil, I think. So I think all of these things are, how can I put it? They form the backdrop against which retailers have to operate. And you have to be aware of these things. You have to understand them, and you have to shape your strategy, keeping these things in mind. Having said that, there's not a lot you can do about much of this, of course. On the plus side, except here in the UK, obviously, where we seem to have decided to leave the EU, a lot of the regulations and so on, there's a lot of convergence. There's a lot of, for all that we're looking at different regions, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, very different states of development. There's a lot of convergence. There's a lot of sense that you can do certain things that will work across markets, even as you're kind of keeping a weather eye on localism, as it were. And the other thing I think that I would highlight is we're beginning to look at things like data and regulatory control, and I think that will become an interesting area in the years ahead.
And we're seeing that impact on retailers, whether it's the waste directives at one end, or certain global companies adopting one form of USB-C rather than another. So, we're seeing all of that. We've had, recently discussion on AI. We're having class actions against some of the, software global giants about where their responsibilities do and don't stand. So I think we're definitely seeing, and I think for next year we'll see this more, the idea of Europe as an enormous consumer and citizen base discussing how they relate to other people. But I mentioned the consumer, so let's very quickly have a little dive into the ever lovely consumer. So 2 charts here, just to give you some overviews. The first one is the monthly online spend by country. And roughly put, if you take the light blue as the middle and the darker colours on the right as the high spenders, then what we can see is that there's a rough north to south drift and a rough west to east drift that has the big spenders in the more mature markets. So whether it's in Sweden, people seem to spend a lot and live online, whereas in Czechia, it's more at the lower price point ends. North, south, west, east, it sort of mirrors, if you like, the economic development. But one of the things that's been intriguing is the move to subscription services as people move away from the never-ending grind of attract, interest, convert, upsell, retain. The marketing grind where you're doing product by product. We've long had a focus on the customer, and this seems to be changing with business models now, where we're looking at rental, monthly updates, buying clubs, subscription models. That seems to be a new thing that we're seeing, and the growth of that. Jonathan, where did you see this first off, and how are you interpreting this move to subscriptions?
I think it's quite interesting. I would love to drill down over the next year into the figures and just see how much of it is about Amazon Prime, for instance, because that's in a sense that is a subscription, and I think a lot of people would interpret it that way. But that's about delivery. At the other end of the scale, you've got the kind of, for years now we've had a vegetable box, so we get our vegetables once a week, and if they're delivered because who wants to go to the supermarket and buy those things? So it's coming at both ends. It's quite an intriguing thing. It's almost like I think of it as almost a return to sort of older forms of retail in a funny kind of way,
with the direct delivery. But we're also seeing things like rental, monthly subscription with a clothes box coming to you. The 5 for 5 offerings, or 5 for 55, where you get 5 items of clothing every month for a £55 rental fee. So interesting things there. But you mentioned Prime, and Angad, I know we were chatting a while ago about how Prime is making Prime available to non-Prime retailers, so you can have a Prime-like service even if you don't sell on Amazon. We have TikTok offering its direct Prime-like competition. What do you take on this? Because you run some of these, don't you? So Primification, subscription models, how are you seeing that?
Yeah, it's a very interesting phenomenon. I think, as Jonathan also mentioned, maybe most of the retailers and brands have that impact of seeing Amazon's success and the kind of profitability and things that Amazon has been able to do with it. But see, the larger point is what we see with some of the retailers that we are working with. They need to find ways to personalize deliveries, and they need to find ways to increase the customer lifetime value. Now, everyone needs a delivery at home, but nobody wants to pay. So the best way is how do you increase their customer lifetime value? And that's where we see we've been working with brands to actually who are launching their own Prime services in Germany, in UK, and it does 2 things for them. One is it saves. Of course, it's obvious that So for example, one of a fashion brand customer based in UK, for them, there are only 18% of their customers which have subscribed to their Prime service since past 2 years when they launched. And the good part is it accounts for around 62% of their overall revenue. So they know that the overall customer lifetime value is increasing on one hand. On the other hand, if you look at the supply chain side and the delivery cost, there are quite a bit of benefits to be had there as well. Because especially in the metro cities with high dense areas, the density of orders is high, and hence you can put your own fleet and probably control that delivery experience, which brings down the cost rather than giving it to carrier. So we have seen some of these retailers actually looking for solutions and a hybrid approach where they can use carriers for certain geographies and areas where order density is not high. And wherever order density is high, they can actually push for personalization as well as lower cost of delivery by putting their own fleet. So it's actually giving them benefit on both ends. So it's quite interesting to see that.
Okay, so now you brought us on to a sort of confluence of two things. So actually, it's three things. I've just done my mental maths. Thing one is next dayness. Thing two is the sustainability of next dayness. And the third thing is anyone going to pay for 1 and 2 above? So let me just quickly show one of the report slides, which is looking at the importance to the consumer. And one thing that struck me on this is that so the dark blue on the left is people saying we just don't care about it, and then is on the right. Sorry, it's I don't care about it. On the left, it's important for all of my purchases. So I would have been expecting at the top of that chart to see places like the UK, Germany, sophisticated market to say, come on, make it next day. Whereas what we seem to have is that the new and emerging markets have gone from not much e-commerce to the most demanding customers in Europe, which I think is driven by the fact they're relatively young and that they have a second mover advantage. So the people who are going online in Romania, they aren't back in 2000, 2005, 2010. They've joined e-commerce along with the best at sort of 2020, 21 levels. And everyone's expecting wonders from them. So we have the consumer telling us that they discriminate based on good delivery options. But we also have them then telling us how important carbon neutral delivery is. So it's saying, right, we want you to be there straight away, but could you do it in a nice way? And for this one, rather than split it by country, I've actually looked at a split here by generation, so we can see that again, roughly speaking, that the younger you are, the more important it is to have carbon neutral delivery. But before we get too deep on that, Dim, I was thinking about our conversation earlier when we're trying to balance the idea of we want to be sustainable, but will someone pay for it? So could you maybe just give us a view on the demand for next day, the demand for sustainable, and is someone going to pay for it? The big question, your thoughts, please.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So if we look at demand for next day delivery, so I think what's very important, as we also see with the customers globally for Ascendia, that there is a different service, different segmentation of services. So whether it's the speed, multiple deliveries to let's say delivery into multiple days or next day. I think both options are important for retailers globally to have. If you look at sustainability, more and more customers, it's an important aspect for customers, as every customer, they have their own targets on how to be to reduce the number of emissions globally. In Ascendia, we took a big step as of January 2022, in which we offset all our emissions, and we continue this path by reducing our emissions. We have an asset-light model in which we do not own the majority of our infrastructure, which means that we rely on the information, the data we get from our partners. But we have our ambition to continue, let's say, delivering sustainable solutions, because this is what our customers are asking. And one of the examples is, for instance, the new product we recently launched. It's ePack Returns, in which we optimize global return services for our customers, which includes optimization across the chain. I think you're on mute, Ian.
Thank you. I was getting excited then. I think this is an interesting point. You said asset light, which I think is lovely. I'm going to use that when my children ask me for more money next time. What this opens up is the idea of partnership. So we've had in the past, a retailer would use a service provider, and there would be, if you like, a barrier. I hand the parcel to you, it's now your problem. But we are now more and more involved with the packaging, delivery information, the experience, the returns, the sending to lockers, collecting store. It's really part of us. But at the same time, we're also being held accountable for the data we show. So, elsewhere in the report, we're talking about the legislation in France, for example, where we now have to disclose the environmental impact of the clothing we sell. So France is leading on that. So I'm sure that other European countries will follow. So talk to me about working in partnership and how you can have the data about other people's activities, but also then be confident that the data is right, so you're not risking your reputation. Are we moving into a world of partnership throughout the supply chain, horizontal partnership, and how do we get ready for this world of transparency, responsibility, even when it's partners? Dim, how have you been navigating this?
Yeah, so in Ascendia, our founding partners are obviously La Poste and Switchpost. So we have a strong background in the postal world, but we also work with other carriers, which makes us independent and agile to basically act and select the partners we need for our customers. So based on criteria, which includes sustainability, we choose what are the carriers we want to work with, what are the carrier and the solutions we need for our customers. So we are very transparent with our customers about sharing data. We show live tracking events, and in terms of sustainability, we calculate the CO2 emissions for our customers, and we continue to show transparency on this, which also links to the partners we work with. So this is one of the steps we are taking.
Great. I'm just realizing I was very naughty, and I said earlier on about the willingness of the customer to pay for sustainability, and I totally ignored my own question and carried on. So if I can just firstly tell myself off, and then secondly give the question to Jonathan about where we're seeing this balance between the customer's desire for sustainable, transparent services and who's paying for it. Do we have any thoughts on that, Jonathan?
It's an area I think we need to look at more. I think we've made a lot of glib assumptions that, for instance, if you live in Eastern Europe, you're not interested in sustainability. If you live in Western Europe, you are. And yet I look at the last summer and the way that climate change really began to feel like it was biting in Southern Europe. And I begin to wonder if it will be something that over the next couple of years really, really begins to go up the agenda in ways that perhaps surprise us even now. And I think we're ready for this to happen. Having said that, I still think it probably is, if you have more disposable income, you have a little more leeway to make inverted commas choices, I think. But that doesn't mean that people who don't have that leeway don't want to make those choices. They'd like to be empowered to do that, please.
And I think as we enter the sort of Q4 where everyone's going discount mad, the feedback we're getting, and this is in our consumer survey, that over 60%, I think 65%, think it's vital or very important that the retailers are sustainable, but only 42% of them are willing to pay €1 or more for a sustainable service. So when we dug into that, the lesson seemed to be that consumers sometimes look at our packaging and our behavior, and they think that we as retailers are wasteful, and that if we just get better, somehow sustainability comes free of charge. So I think we're looking at a world where people may not pay more for sustainable practices, but they will just ignore you if you don't have sustainable practices. So there's no upside, just a lot of downside. I can see, Angad, you're nodding there. Is this how you see it playing out?
Yeah, yeah, actually very right. Interestingly, at Farai, we've had a couple of retailers now actually experimenting this. So we have a product which helps display the right checkout options at the cart for the delivery. You want the next day shipping, etc., express, what carriers. So interestingly, one of the retailers, global retailers, what they are experimenting is to actually put a climate conscious delivery as an option at the cart checkout, and specifically in certain states in US, and they're basing their kind of this option on a report that they have gone through and said that that's their consumer behavior, where the kind of Gen Zs and millennials that they're seeing, shop with them, actually want an option which is more sustainable and are, by the way, ready to pay for it. So it's not a $0 delivery, by the way. They're actually trying to put a dollar value to it and test if somebody's ready to pay for it versus a free delivery, which is after 4 days. So it's an interesting experiment, which has, by the way, already started. Let's see what the results are.
Well, I think we need to get you back in the studio and tell us what the results were. So now let me sort of jump forward and into the past, because when we started researching this, there was a thing called the metaverse that was very hip, trendy, happening, and next. And I don't know about you guys, but no one's mentioned metaverse to me for months, whereas it's all now about generative AI, etc., etc. But we did ask the customer, and I was astounded by the results of our own survey. Sometimes, we ask a question and we're very surprised. So we looked at metaverse awareness, and we asked between 800 and 1,000 consumers in all of these countries, have you heard of the metaverse? And we asked them, have you heard of it and just don't care? Have you heard of it and you're interested to see what it does for retail? And then how many hadn't heard of it? So around a third of consumers in all the countries had just never heard of the metaverse. So that's fine. And then depending on the split, it was about just over a third to a half was saying, I've heard of it and I would quite like to play. And then a third was saying, I've heard of it, I really just don't care. So that was quite interesting. And I thought, well, that's great. Does this mean there's demand? But then we also asked them to say, well, on the basis of, if you've heard of the metaverse, do you want your favorite brands and retailers to be on the metaverse? And the top chart shows that, again, around a third expect the retailers to be there, even though they may not go. And then we said, of these people, how many do you think should be offering shopping in the metaverse? And again, I was amazed at these high numbers. So my interpretation of this is that there is an awareness. The consumer expects the retailers to lead and create something worth then visiting. And I was going to dump this. I thought, well, we're not talking about metaverse now. But then in the last month, we've been looking at, say, TikTok Shop, which is a bit like a metaverse for video. It's not much of a difference fundamentally. It's still screen-based. It's AI-powered. There are many ways to sell. We're seeing Shopify integrating with TikTok, their fulfillment integrated with Amazon, and so on. So it seems to me that if I forget the word metaverse and just think about digital enhanced shopping and getting stuff, it sounds like there's customer interest and demand for more interactive, more exciting, more entertaining ways of shopping. Jonathan, am I just getting misty-eyed and mixing my terms here, or do you have a different interpretation of how sort of enhanced, more fun shopping is seen by the customer?
One of the quotes I wrote down on my notepad here from our expert Paul Skelber's feature on the metaverse was, typing and clicking things is so last century. I think there might be a generational factor at play here. When I look at my own children, and Paul says the same, and I see how they interact with YouTube Shorts and a whole world of web content that really, as a parent, I vaguely think, goodness, I should understand this a bit better, shouldn't I? And I'm someone that works regularly in technology and in the retail sector and so on, and I'm saying that. I think there is, in a sense, we've got very hung up on the idea that the metaverse is this three-dimensional, all singing, all dancing thing. I think Paul would say it's something that's creeping up on us gradually, that the metaverse is just a much more instinctive, interactive version. Web 3.0, if you will.
Very interesting. And I was in the office and everyone was laughing at me last month because now that I finally have access to a car that was invented in the last few years rather than the last century, I can't believe that I just talk to it and it does things. So I'm having, car conversations. So perhaps this conversational commerce that we talked about in 2012 is on its way. And whether we call it metaverse, enhanced digital conversational commerce, how are you reading the customer interest in moving beyond click and scroll web commerce?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, and it's always a curiosity, and specifically one of our customers in fashion retail apparel actually are trying with some gigs. They have a brand which is basically targeted towards girls which are in the age of 16 to 24, for example. They found that they seem to be using it more often. And interestingly, so it has to do something with demographics, of course, and consumer psyche and behavior. What one of the insights that they had with their survey was that usually that is the group which is most restless. Once they have clicked and paid for something, they want it like now. So they won't even go and look at what your ETA is. Is it after 2 days? It is 1 day. They'll start calling where it is. And for them, what they have done is actually at a tracking link, they have tried to give them a little gig where you can actually visualize yourself in that dress so that you stop calling the customer care center, which is a cost to us, but you feel happy about it. And actually they're trying to then upsell some other, clothes as well. So it seems like there are takers for it, but maybe in some specific subsegments to start with.
Okay. Well, all we know is that the Gen X, Gen Z, Gen Alphas, they're the ones that are getting older in a nice way, while the rest of us are getting older in a less happy way. So, whatever they do is something that will become mainstream. I did have someone, we were talking about e-commerce in the Nordics, and someone was talking about long delivery times for fast fashion, saying that sometimes if it takes 7 days to arrive, they've either forgotten they ordered it or they no longer like it. because life has moved on so quickly. So that link between desire and fulfillment is still an important one. Now, I'm just looking at time and realizing we are running out of time. So I wanted to cover off two things, happiness and growth. So I'll start off with growth. Dim, when we were talking earlier on, you were being quite focused on the e-commerce growth figures, which is something that Jonathan and I hadn't picked up on, where we see the penetration of online getting closer and closer to 100%, and we're getting used to it. Whereas you picked out that there's a smaller number shopping online, and therefore possible growth to be had. And just talk us through that, because that's a good message if ever I heard one in November.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. So if we look at the European e-commerce market, as stated in the report, that 19%, 90 of the consumers, so the population in Europe, are online, and only 64% of that of the online population is actually shopping online, which means a huge potential is still out there for retailers, which is about 200 million consumers who can potentially become online shopping customers in the near future. If we look at Eastern Europe, only half of the online population is currently shopping online. So although the market is already huge nowadays, I think moving forward, especially after COVID, after inflation, the markets are currently not as developed as we expected, but the potential is huge if you look at the e-commerce market in Europe.
That's an interesting point. And in the report, we cover off the mobile versus sort of desktop interactions. And so I think it's important to note that those people who are later to e-commerce are still very sophisticated because they're on social media, they're using these AI-powered services, and they're being trained by the first movers to expect a lot. So I think, if you are capable and you're willing to enter these markets with a credible offer, then you're absolutely right, Jim, that there is growth to be had. Hang on, I don't know whether this is something that relates to your sunny disposition and positive outlook on life. But one of the things that we were talking about earlier on was one of my favorite bits of the report, which is where we look at international indices. And one of those is the happiness index, which is one of my favorite ones as well, which looks at the attitude of the consumer and the extent to which they feel happy and positive. And generally speaking, throughout Europe, everyone is at least mediumly happy, but there must be something in the water in the Nordic region, because Denmark, Finland, Iceland are all in the very top end of happiness. So you brought this up earlier. Is there something that you're seeing in the water there?
Most definitely. I think there are global studies also now. It's fundamentally number of people who are more happier. Finland, Denmark, usually the Nordics rank there at the top. Interestingly, two phenomenon that we see with our customers there. One is, a global furniture retailer actually did a research, and they are actually in 100 plus countries, and they were just looking at which of the countries are their consumers are the most happiest, with the e-commerce part of their business. And again, no surprises, they found that Finland was the best one. And honestly, it's not that Finland offers next day delivery for everything, by the way. So it's not about speed, which is actually corroborated by another customer that we have, which is a meal kit service provider. And interestingly, even between Benelux and Nordics, what we see is what's happening is in Benelux, the SLAs of deliveries of those meal kits is like 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours. But okay, my order should arrive, let's say, between a subscription order should arrive between, let's say, 11 to 2. versus in Nordics, that SLA window is literally like 8 hours. And still, the consumers overall surveyed are more happier in Nordics, and they are satisfied with the higher SLAs as well. So
Wow.
I think what studies show is actually is also happening on the ground. So there has to be something in the water for sure.
Great. Well, look, we do have a webinar in our series on the Nordic 100, and I think that would explain some of the happiness there. But let's bounce off that positive note and look to the future. So just to round off our time today, very quickly, we have Jonathan with us. If you're saying to him, this is what you should look at, or what we think will be big in 2024, we'll give you two a chance to say your bit first and then ask Jonathan. But Dim, very briefly, what do you think is going to be our discussion topic for 2024?
Making notes.
So in 2024, if we look at the European market in regards to this report, then I think it stated that 73% of the consumers who shop online, they purchase orders from abroad, which is a huge number. So, and as we see as well, that technology is stepping up. There are even more channels. We do not speak about e-retailers, retailers. Let's say channels are everywhere. So the access customers would have to buy goods online will definitely increase next year. In combination with the percentage of people shopping cross-border, I would see the international growth will continue across Europe.
Great. Well, look, I'm going to do a quick plug for ChannelX, which is our new channels title. And if you want to check out channelx.world or channelxworld.com, which is our event on that, then absolutely agree with you, Dim. That is a growing topic, if you excuse the pun. Angad, in a nutshell, what's 2024 top topic going to be in your view?
Yeah, I think three things. One, as far as which we are seeing too much growth of, is primification of the overall delivery experience. More brands are going to go after that to increase the customer lifetime value. Second is finding the right balance between cost, managing the cost, and sustainability. Because as I think Dim also mentioned very rightly, most of the customers that we are working with have those carbon emission goals, and they need to balance that out. The third and the final one is, of course, going to be generative AI. I feel there's a lot of noise around that, but interestingly, there are some use cases which are coming out with certain specific consumer segments that we see, where those delivery experiences will be more personalized using generative AI. So I feel that these are the three top takes for 2024.
Well, I mean, that was a big nutshell, but three very good points. And I should point out to any of Amazon's lawyers that are listening in that we use primification in totally a non-appropriative way, and please don't sue us. Now, Jonathan, you've heard all of those. If you had to take one thing that you think should be a focus area for us in 24, which one are you going to take? Either Dim's, Angad's, or your own?
Oh, I was going to do three. I'll tell you what, I'll stick with one. When you are introducing new technologies, when you are thinking about what technologies you are going to use in this Web 3.0 world that's ahead of us with sustainability and all those things, what's useful to your customers? Keep that question front and center.
Oh, lovely. That is a great plug. And I should also say that our European Consumer Observatory is tracking customer attitudes, opinions to things like sustainability, delivery, personalization, and so on. So a very good segue there, Jonathan. Thank you for that. Well, time is running out for us. Thank you, everyone, for joining us and giving us some of your time today. If you are joining us live and it's still November 2023, then you will get an email from us with a link to the report. And please do download that, share that with your friends as an early Christmas present with our compliments. If you have any questions areas you disagree with, you want us to work on, drop us a note, research@retailx.net, and we read all incoming, and we'll be very happy to take your good ideas and suggestions and work on them. If you're looking at this in the future and it's not November 2023, then do look in the description below on YouTube, and there'll be a link to the report. And who knows, maybe even the 2024 report will be out by then. It is the future after all. So massive thank you to Anga, Dim, Jonathan for joining us today. Do look out for the report in your newsletter. And as I said, the URL is there just in case it's not coming to you directly. So that's it from the studio. It's a big thank you from all of us here, and thank you for joining us. All the best, and goodbye.